You fool! Warren is dead.
Welcome to HorrorBabble. The Secret of the South Pole is a tale of Antarctica by the little-known Irish author Hamilton Drummond, first published in the April 1902 edition of the Windsor Magazine. Three castaways encounter a centuries-lost ship from the polar depths, its silent cabin holding hints of a strange fate no living man can explain. I hope you enjoy this one. A Secret of the South Pole by Hamilton Drummond. All Sloppleton knew him as Captain Towson, and if I had my own suspicions that quartermaster with a third mate's certificate was nearer the mark, I kept my opinion to myself. The fiction, if it was a fiction, was an innocent one, and none of his making, nor, indeed, any business of mine. The only claims I ever heard emerge were those of seamanship and experience. Of the first, I am no judge, a 10-foot punt being the largest craft I have ever navigated. But the frank deference shown him by the fishermen and longshore sailor folk argued that his claim was just. That he was a deep-water seaman, I am certain, not simply because of his familiarity with sundry foreign ports, of which I also had some knowledge, but there was that depth in the eye, that set and grave immobility of face, which are born of dealing with nature in the bulk. The serious gravity of the sea begets itself in those who do business continually in great waters. As to his experience, I have only himself as witness. But even when large allowance has been made for amplification and the imagination, which is the gift of the sea, I hold the evidence to be sufficient. Those of my friends to whom I have retold his tales have not scrupled to call him liar, and certainly his stories were at times largely capable of disbelief. But for my part, I always found it hard to doubt him. He was so circumstantial, so fluent, so calmly level, so credulous of himself. There was no assertiveness, no subtle doubt lurking in an appeal for belief, but just a quiet assurance that disarmed incredulity. Your habitual liar has a way of calling the gods to witness that is in itself suspicious. With Towson there was none of that. The thing was so because it was so. It was as if Galileo said the sun moved because it moved, and not all the Pope Urbans in the world could make it a lie. Still, at times I almost had my doubts, and was inclined to think he had missed his generation, and was a survival of the Arabian Nights. For instance, he had one story of a tidal wave, the precedent hollow of which burrowed so deep that it laid bare. But that is not the present story, and so may be left aside. Only, even with it, as Captain Towson told the tale, I declare I saw the oozy sludge of the sea's foundations creep up and up the hissing crystal surface of the watery mountain, until its foul and slimy blackness stained it to its summit. A lie? Well, maybe so. But then, you did not hear Captain Towson tell the story, and I did. More truth lies in the way a thing is told than most men suppose, which is a subtle saying and needs some thinking out. We had become very good friends, we two, especially during 10 days' wet weather. Sloppleton is not a cheerful place in a grey drizzle, and a man wearies of the smell of twist tobacco and stale beer held in suspense in the atmosphere of the local taproom. These 10 days, therefore, were mostly spent by the open window of my diggings, our boot heels on the wooden bench which lay by the wall, and ourselves sunk as far in the comfort of 2 armchairs as the hard padding of the shiny horsehair would permit. But once, it was on the afternoon of the 10th day, a straggle of sunshine tempted us out into the sloppy road, and when the downpour recommenced, Captain Towson's cottage was the nearest shelter, and there we retreated. It was not the first time I had been his guest, and so the collected treasures of his seafaring life were more or less familiar. There were the usual birds of gay plumage under glass shades, the uncouth seashells, the fretted sprays of coral, the dreary conventional specimens which served to keep green the memory of the retired merchant seaman. A ship's model was placed above the doorway, its spars awry, its thread ropes snapped and tangled. Over the mantelpiece there gaped a set of shark's jaws, topped by the blade of a swordfish, and perched on the carefully dusted Bible was the figure of a nodding mandarin. There were also obviously the matter-of-course possessions of such a man that I had never given them a second look. But now, as Captain Towson absented himself to hunt up the ingredients of a friendly grog, I wandered aimlessly round the room and took stock of its stale curiosities. One thing only struck me as an oddity, and that by reason of its inconsequence rather than its strangeness, and at it I was staring when Captain Towson returned with his liquid hospitality carefully balanced in the depths of a soup plate. Not, be it understood, what he would have called a wash, but I take it trays were at a premium. "Ah," said he, setting down the plate with a clang that drove the little mandarin into a passion of affirmation. "You're a deep one, you are. That's the gem of the whole kit, that is. I've always said I'll give the whole shanty to the man that tells me what it is, and now's your chance, for what I say I stick to." "It's a bit dark, Captain," I began. "Oh, have all the light on the subject you can." And he chuckled as if at a joke. "I'll pull the blind up. There, what do you make of it now?" To be frank, I didn't make much. It was an irregular, flattish fragment, perhaps 2 inches square, and slightly curved inwards at top and bottom. A stout thread held it in place against a piece of millboard, and the whole was framed and glazed like a picture. In colour it was greyish-blue, and its surface smooth but dull. There was neither inscription nor mark upon it that I could see. "Well?" And he shook me by the elbow with a kind of good-humoured, triumphant impatience. "Well?" Tilting it so that the light, dim at the best, for the rain was coming down heavier than ever, fell upon it, I bent down and then drew back, in the approved fashion of a critic who is at a loss for an opinion, and yet fears to show his ignorance. That is to say, it looks like metal." Captain Towson smacked his thigh noisily. "The shanty's safe for this time. Guess again, mate." But I shook my head. What was the use of guessing? There was no doubt that Captain Towson's mystery went beyond the mere composition of the fragment he preserved so carefully, and I said as much. "You're right, sir, and by gum, them that goes down to the sea in ships see mortal queer things. Now, there isn't a museum in the whole country as the equal to that scrapple of shucks there. Metal, says you? Well, maybe it is. Then again, maybe it's glass, maybe it's pottery, and maybe it's something of all three that we folks on our side of the world know nothing about. I give you my word I don't know, and I never met the man as could tell me. That's a bit of the South Pole, that is." And again he chuckled, but checked himself. "But by gum, it was no laughing matter. When I die, I'm going to leave it to the British Museum. I suppose they'll pound it to bits to see what it's made of. Even then, they won't be any the wiser, and there's no more where that came from. At least I hope not, if what I think came in it. We've trouble enough in the world without that. Well, let 'em pound. When that day comes, I won't care. Mix your grog, and I'll tell you how I came by it." In the soup plate were 2 long tumblers pushed one into the other, a small jug of water, and a bottle of rum 3 parts full. Separating the tumblers, he handed me one, laid his thick, stumpy fingers round his own so that their lower line encircled the curve of the bottom, and filled the glass until the spirit rose level above the upper line of his forefinger. Then he handed me the bottle, and added about an equal quantity of water. "Strict measure's my motto, Mr. Wood. Strict measure. Then a man never drinks too much nor too little. The first is brutal, and the second beastly. Here's luck. Now, sir, you'd best sit down, and Yes, I'll fill it again. In a manner, d'ye see, there's 2 yarns in it, and I'm not so sure where to begin. At the beginning? Easy said and seems reasonable, but I ain't no circus rider. To spin 2 yarns at once is about as bad as to straddle a couple of bare-backed horses. Sooner or later they'll part company, and then where are you? No, I'll drop the bark Julia K. Anderson, 5 weeks out from Frisco and bound round the Horn, much as she dropped me. And that's without so much as a by your leave. And begin where she left off with 3 of us, Tobias Clark, Joe Brady, and myself, adrift in the Pacific. I was a forecastle hand those days, Mr. Ward, and I'm not ashamed of it. Why should I? It's a noble calling, is the sea. And I reckon England sucks her empire out of the salt water. The forecastle isn't the poop deck, I know. There are some that sneer at a sailorman's ignorance, but mostly the forecastle knows as much as the forecastle wants to. And when I say we're about 110 degrees west and 5 degrees south, you'll know we were half distance between the Marquesas and the Galapagos. Thanks be to goodness, the ocean stood to her name, and with the line so near we had no cold to grumble at. How did we get there, and in an open boat? Now, sir, that's the other yarn, and I'll tell it any day in the week. But what I'm talking of now is that sliver of potsherd there in the frame, and the sooner I get to it, the sooner I'll be done. Being there was 2 things we might do, make east to the mainland or west to the islands, and the drift of the current settled it for us. No man has sense what's more in the tropics than he can help, and when God Almighty sets the sea drifting, and he raised his hand reverently, as if in a salute, why, it's only a fool that doesn't say amen and be thankful. That means, d'ye see, we headed for the islands. A day and a night we had made our westing, and with the sudden coming of the morning Brady woke me up. "Glory be," says he, shaking me. "The trip's over afore it's begun, and good luck go with it. Look you there." With that I sat up, blinking and gaping, for I had been sound as a top, and my eyes were still glued with sleep, till he slewed me round and pointed astern. "Whoop," says he, dancing and laughing and crying all in one, like the mad Irishman he was. "If that isn't the makings of land, oh, call me bull." By that I had my knee on the after thwart and was staring east with my hands as telescope. The sun was up, and a point or 2 to the north, so that the black spot was plain enough, being no more than 5 miles away, maybe 4, the shimmer of the sea in the sun making it hard to guess. Too plain, for I turns to Brady and says to him, sudden like, "Bull." My word, Mr. Ward, you should have seen his jaw drop, though at first he didn't catch on. "What do you mean? Who's you calling names?" "What I say. Bull calf, if you like it better, and a darn sight too good for you. Don't you know a derelict when you see her?" By this time Clark had crawled out of the bows and was on his hands and knees between us, leaning over the starn. "Irish is right and Irish is wrong," says he, which is a way them Irish have and makes it so hard to know when you've got 'em. "She's a blamed hulk, that's what she is sure enough, but I guess—" Clark was a New Yorker. "I guess she's sound enough, for she rides high, and a tight hulk is better than a crank cockleshell any day in the week." Well, that didn't satisfy Brady. Not that he kicked. No, sir, Brady was no fool till his 4th tot of rum. But as he laid himself to his oar, me steering, I saw his face was sort of vacant-like, and he was muttering, "Bull, bull," slowly and softly to himself, like a man trying to get the grip of something that beat him. It's not often a man gives himself away as badly as Brady did. Well, sir, as I say, I was steering, and little by little as the hulk bulked again the sky, I liked its look less and less. 'Twasn't that it had no masts and was as bare of bulwarks as a canal barge. That was right enough in a derelict, and I'd seen it from the first, though Brady in his hot haste had missed that they were missing. No, it wasn't that the decks were swept as clean as if they'd been whittled bare with a jackknife, but it was the unchancy look of her. Such a craft I never saw in all my days. She was drifting port side on, and as she rose on the sky, she was more like a brace of narrow 2-story cottages gone awash than a decent ship. high and rounded at the bows, high and rounded at the starn, and low in the waist, with no kind of elbow room between the two. She had great square windows for ports, and except for the ragged stumps of two masts, she was naked as a shell. There wasn't so much as a twisted end of a stay sticking out from the side. When she was a little less than a quarter of a mile off, I sang out, and we lay to and took stock. My, but her hull was smooth. The old man of the Frisco hooker had been a bully for holystoning, but Julia Kay never had a deck's polish like the side walls and gable ends of them cottages, no, sir. Their smoothness was past words, and fairly beat me. But Clark, the Yank, twigged it in a wink. I reckon he'd done some whaling in his time. Ice, says he, and whips of ice at that. Begorra, chips in Brady with a grin. I hope she's some aboard. I could do with a bit of the grog in this weather. But neither Clark nor me laughed. The uncanny lampishness of the thing bothered me. Blame me if I ever saw such a craft, says I. Haven't you? Says Brady. Well, faith, I have, or half one anyhow. It was high and dry on the Kerry coast, and they do say it was there afore Cromwell's time. Bad cess to him. Ah, Captain Towson, interrupted I. I have it now. She was Spanish. Maybe, sir, maybe. What we saw afterwards might have been Spanish, but Spain never made that morsel of shucks there in the frame. Call her Spanish, Mr. Ward, though it makes no odds. What I've figured out is this. She went bust, say, 40 degrees west and the same north, and the southeast arm of the Gulf Stream bore her past the Azores, west of the Cape Verde, and so into the Guinea Channel. Then she got south into the equatorial current, and drifted west until the floe splits on San Roque, when down she came south again, until she caught the Antarctic drift, and crawled away east on the 40th parallel. Somewhere near St. Paul's a wind took her, and away she went into the ice, where Clark made out she lay 200 years and more. Long or short, it's there, to the best of my belief. That bit of China metal went aboard of her, though that, like the reckoning I've laid out for her, is nothing better than guesswork. It's mighty little we know of what goes on in the pack ice way south, and one thing sure, in the ice she was. The pulpy sleekness of her timbers proved that. For a while we sat eyeing her. Then says Clark, "A corpse, boys, that's what she is, a corpse." "A corpse that doesn't want no burying," answers Brady. "Leastways not till we've done with her. Here, skipper, give us a tot of rum all round and let's go aboard. I've had as much of a half-inch plank as is good for me health." But Clark had a word to say. "She's 100 years old, maybe 2, maybe 3. Happens she's rotten." "Rotten yourself," cried Brady, swirling the boat round with a dash of his oar. "Look how she floats. I'm for boarding her anyhow. 1,600 miles in an open boat when I can have a sound bottom under me and a deck overhead? Not likely. Put your back in it, mate." "Put your back in it," said I, and no more passed until we were squarely alongside the hulk. Still, for all Brady's talk, the more I saw, the less I liked. If it was as old as Clark said, then it must be the devil's own ship, surely, or it would have gone under long before. Then again, Clark might be wrong, and when I came to think of it, that was worse. So there I hung in the wind, betwixt and between it is and it isn't. But Brady had no doubts. "Saints be good to us," said he cheerfully, and standing up on the thwart, he gripped the edge of the port and looked in. The upper port, you understand. The under one was close on the water's edge and tight battened. Then, "Saints be good to us," he said again, but as if he had more need of the goodness and wasn't so sure it was to be had for the asking. The sea was as calm as a lake, but where there's such a vast of water, there's always a rise and fall. Not much of a swing it wasn't, but enough to tilt the port now up an inch or two and now down. "Well?" said Clark. "Well?" But it wasn't until the hull had swung 2 or 3 times that Brady answered. "The skylight's covered over, but I'm thinking Davy Jones is aboard, for I see what's like a bundle of clothes on the floor. Best shin up and whip the tarpaulin off." If one shins up, says I, we all shin up. We stick together, whether here or there. All it is, says Brady, and up he climbs with the paint around the crook of his arm. The port gave him a foothold, and from there he could get a grip of the edge of the deck. But all the same, it was no easy job. Once on deck, he made the rope fast round the stump of the mast, so that me and Clark had an easy road. The sea takes a man to many a queer spot, Mr. Ward, but never to a queerer than that old hulk. Where we stood was more like the round top of a tower than a ship's deck, and though I'm no more a coward than another, I'd have no stomach for a gale of wind on such a craft, but the colour was queerer than the build. 'Twas all a greyish white, smooth as an egg and spongy like sodden cork, so spongy that our boots left the print of the big nails clear up to the flat of the sole. And where Clark's was split at the heel, there was the split showing sharp and clean with every tramp. Ice, says he again, ice and freezing and thawing and drying and soaking and freezing. That's what that means. The only part of the deck where we stood that wasn't as flush as the palm of your hand was the skylight. It ran up the middle of the poop and was longish and low. I reckon it served as a seat in the days the old scow wasn't a corpse. Brady was right when he said it was covered over, but 'twasn't with tarpaulins. Maybe they didn't have tarpaulins in those days. If not, they had what was as good, 4 or 5 or perhaps 8 or 10 thicknesses of canvas and blankets, but so matted that no man could tell which was one and which was t'other. The rain and the spray and the wind and the sun had beat them so solid. Tags of cordage hanging from the rings at the sides showed how they'd been lashed, but the ropes had wore out long before, and what held them in their place was a criss-cross of chain, stout enough once maybe, but rusted to the fineness of a wedding ring. The whole was a dirty, washed-out grey, the colour something of a wasp's nest, and the most corpse-like thing in the whole corpse ship. "Ice," says Clark again, with a nod of his head at the skylight. All that was to keep the cold out, and by gum, I guess they wanted it, every scrap. "Then they don't want it no more," says Brady. "Be the holy fly, it's hot enough here. Let's have it off, bullies." The chains were little better than streaks of rust, and so snapped with the first tug. But I tell you, Mr. Ward, that tug gave me the shivers. It was ghastly to think they hadn't been handled for maybe more than 300 years, and that the beggars who strained them were lying down below with mighty little on but their bones. But when it came to ripping off the rotten canvas, that was ghastlier still. I give you my word, it was like stripping the dead. And even now there are times when I lie awake o' nights that I can hear the soft wrastle of the rip of the stuff. And when I hear it, the skin of my back creeps, and I go cold down the spine. There was a grating under the canvas, and glass under the grating, all covered thick with a woolly, soft dust like you get in the corners of your pockets. The glass and grating were both set in a frame, but the wood had shrunk with the heat. It stuck a bit, but no more than was natural, and rather as if something was sucking at the glass. The edges seemed free enough, and except for the sucking back, it lifted out as easy as, say, knife. A bar of iron, still pretty stout, ran along the middle of the skylight from end to end, holding the back of the frame in place. Laying the glazed grating down on the deck, we looked inside. "All that," said Captain Towson, breaking off suddenly, "all that is nothing, at least no more than any man might come across in 5 years cruising over God's waters. But what came after was queer, mighty queer, that I'll admit. What with the portholes and the open skylight and the sun blazing above, the cabin was as plain to be seen as the palm of your hand. My word, but it was spick and span. Of course, there was the raffle of odds and ends lying round loose, for I take it sailormen were just sailormen 300 years ago, and had their easy-going ways much as they have now. But there warn't no dust to speak of. I tell you, Mr. Ward, that took my breath. All these years of travel and no dust to show for them. Why, you can't leave a cuddy a week, but you could write your name on the chairbacks. Yes, that bothered me. But what bothered me worse was to see a slim, queer-shaped bottle standing on end on the table right under my nose and half full of some brownish stuff. Now, what business had a bottle to be end up after jogging half round the world and rocked by heaven only knows what gales of wind? A slim crank thing it was, too. We don't have the like of it nowadays, and more's the pity it got broke. And what business had the liquor lying in it all them years and never drying up? That, as Clark would say, rattled me, and small wonder. It was a creepy thing to come on all of a sudden, and in such a ghost of a craft, but there was more besides it. By the bottle was a tin platter, bright enough, so bright you'd say a cloth had wiped it the day before, and on the platter was a lump of ship's bread. It was like nothing in the way of hardtack I ever saw, but ship's bread it was, and no mistake. I tell you, that staggered me. The bottle maybe was fixed somehow, and the platter maybe was fixed. But what fixed a lump of crusty, slippy hardtack all these 100 years, and the hulk drifting through who knows what wrestle and tumble of seas? I don't know that Clark or Brady took notice. I reckon they were hunting after the heaps of clothes Irish had seen through the port, and when I saw them peering and stretching their necks, I quit shivering and followed their wake. 3 of them there were, all the length but twice the girth of a common man, so that when Clark said ice for the 4th time, I guess he was about right. You can bet it knows how to freeze south of 80 degrees. They were bunched in a heap by the cuddy door, and must have had 3 suits apiece on 'em, thin in the legs, with no breeches to speak of, puffed at the hips, and with great heavy cloaks. The door was fast shut, and I could see a thick bar across it, the ends falling into sockets beyond the posts, as if to stand against hard pressure. "For bears and such vermin," says Clark, who caught my eye. "I guess them 3 was all that was left of the ship's crew, and so good people were scarce. The rest was in kingdom come." I reckon he was about right, but I didn't answer. I was trying to puzzle it out for myself, and the way they lay told a tale. They were all head on to the door. They were all flat on their faces, with their arms stretched out, and their fingers clawing at the floor. That meant they were making a bolt for the open when something dropped them in their tracks. Dropped them sudden and dropped them sure. Just so, but what? What? That's what I asked myself. Maybe the answer was that one held what looked like a crumple of paper in his hand. Whitey-yellow it was. And on the floor, a foot or 2 from their big boots, was a mash of bluey-grey stuff. That there stuck in the frame was the biggest morsel left. The rest was stamped into grit. They had no hats on. Maybe they'd rolled off when they tumbled, and their hair was longer than was common, even for an old-time sailorman. But their ears peeped through the wisps, and the shape of them and the shape of their hands was as plump and good as if they were having no more than a dog's snooze till the boatswain whistled. I said as much to Clark. "Boatswain?" says he. "I guess Davy Jones was the last boatswain that piped them to quarters. Tell you what, Towson, see that bluey grit there, and what's in the chap's hand? I'll lay $1 they picked up something in the ice that scared them to death, and it was in that smashed grit." Maybe he was right. In my own belief, the thing had been some kind of hollow case with more in it than what that hand gripped. Some kind of a gas, maybe, or fluid that turned to gas. And in the turning... But there, it's all guesswork. "When it comes to betting," says Brady, "I'll bet I'm going below. And as the door's battened, here's my road." Leaning forward, he gripped the iron bar with his left hand and caught a grab at the edge of the skylight with his right to hoist himself up. But as his fingers closed inwards over the ledge, he flung himself back with a yell. "Preserve us! What's that?" Then he stood staring, his great mouth wide open and drooping at the corners. 'Twas all one as if he'd seen a ghost. "Shucks," says Clark. "Did you never face a dead man before? That kind can't hurt you." "Ever face a dead man? Aye, did I," answers Brady, the Irish in him flaring up. "And if you give me any more of your lip, I'll be facing another, and mighty quick, too. Who said dead men?" Though, be the hokey, 'twas all the feel of a corpse. Then why don't you go down? For answer, Brady leant one hand on the bar as before and bent cautiously forward. The other hand he rested on the outer edge of the skylight, and I took notice he didn't put as much as a tip of his finger across the rim. Down he lowered himself, slowly down, 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 like as if he was going to drink, until his face was level with the bar and the edge of the wood. Then, as it dipped below the line, he jumped back like before. "None of your tricks, Clark," he yelled. "Tricks?" says Clark. "Is the fool gone mad? Didn't you slop something cold and wet in me face?" "You're crazed," says Clark. "Clean crazed. Where would I get anything cold or wet in such a swelter of heat? No one stirred a finger. Here, I'll go below." Sitting on the edge of the wood, he gripped the bar, slewed himself round, and made as if to drop his legs through the skylight. But all of a sudden he stopped, and I heard him gasp. "By gum," says he, and his face went white. "That's queer. That's darned queer." "What's the matter, Clark?" said Brady, jeering him. "Why don't you go down? Is it the dead men you're feared of? Sure men like them can't hurt you. God rest their souls," he added solemnly. But Clark never heeded him, except to say, "I'm sorry I spoke Irish." And the fashion he said it, subdued and puzzled-like, meant more than the words, though it wasn't Clark's way to climb down. He was a New Yorker, you remember, and that kind mostly hangs on to their crow, right or wrong. From Brady, he turned to me. "Lay your hand alongside my leg, will you, Towson, and tell me what's got me." Then I noticed that, instead of his feet dangling this way and that, as a man's mostly do, they hung stiff and cramped-like. "Got you?" says I. "What could get you? Are you pulling my leg?" "No," says he, speaking very quietly and with a weak twist of his mouth. "But there's something pulling mine. Leastways, holding it. Feel along of me, as I told you, and for heaven's sake, hurry." With that, I stretched my arm down, palm out slowly, slowly, the way I'd seen Brady move, though for the life of me I couldn't have told why, for there was nothing to see, and, like him, I went back with a jump and a yell. There, just below the line of the frame, where there was nothing at all but clear air and sunshine, was a cold, spongy clamminess like dry, soft ice that was a thin, dry jelly, and that sank under the hand like dough. "Why don't you go down?" says Brady again. "Why don't you go down, you Yankee coward? Is it the dead you're feared of?" That stung Clark. Curious, isn't it? Call a man a cur, and he grins, or maybe ruffles up a bit. But call him an English cur, and he'll shake the life out of you. To couple Yank with coward was too much for Clark, and heaven keep me from ever seeing again the sight I saw then. "Who's coward?" says he. "Don't talk so much Irish. Coward yourself, and come on if you dare. All hands below." Gripping the bar in front, he swung off and let himself drop with a thrust up that partly turned him round. For a breath he hung as if upon nothing, but I reckon he hadn't fairly let go the bar when he'd have given the world and all for a fresh hold. Down he floundered, not straight as a man should, but as if he was drowning in cold pitch that sucked him in by inches. That the stuff, whatever it was, gripped him close, I know, for I saw his clothes run up his leg and leave it bare. And that he repented his foolhardiness, I know, for up flew one hand to catch at the bar, up with a wild swing, and missed it, gritting it with his fingernails, and out flew the other, clutching at the wooden ledge, but missed it too. "Help! Help!" he screamed with a sob, throwing his head back. His eyes caught mine as he went under, though to me and Brady it was just that his open mouth was below the line of the skylight. But under he was, for the scream stopped short with a choked gurgle, though his mouth gaped, and his jaw wagged like as if he was chewing on something soft. Up to that we had stood scared and staring, but as he screamed our sense came back, and we plunged forward, grabbing at his hands. But if he was late, so were we. He had slipped past reach, and as we watched, We saw him light on the table slowly and greasily and paw at it vaguely with his feet. For a minute he swayed there, his big sea boots making no noise on the wood, and his arms beating the air with cramped jerks, like as if something held his hands. Then he staggered and rolled sideways to the floor, where he lay on his back, 12 feet away, giving us stare for stare, and we no more able to help him than if he was 50 fathoms under the sea. As many men as you've fingers I've seen drown, but never one like that. Yet drown he did, if I know what drowning means. God have mercy upon him, for it was an awful end. 3 great pants he gave, pants like to split his chest. Then he lay quiet, and as the hulk rocked to the heave of the swell, the sunshine through the port played backwards and forwards across his face, without so much as a flaw in its light. Brady pulled himself together first. After we'd failed to catch Clark's hands, he had leaned over the skylight, dry sobbing and praying like a mother by a cradle. But at last he shook himself, as a dog might coming out of water. "I'm going down, Towson," says he. "Down?" cried I. "Down? Why, man, it's death. Do you see yonder? Arrah, then. Have I eyes? Isn't it that takes me down? How far off's the table? 7 feet, be it more or less," says I, wondering if I had a madman on my hands next. "What's your notion?" "My notion is, the air's froze, not with cold, but with something that was in what smashed on the floor there. My notion is the cuddy was corked as tight as a captain's gig, and when the poor divils broke whatever it was, they found sudden death, for the air must have gone solid in a wink. See how they broke for the door and missed it? That's my notion, and I'm going to hack the air out'n her." Well, sir, hack it out he did, but the bottle went smash, and the bread turned to dust the minute the fresh air struck it. So did the 3 poor souls, all but their bare bones, and their queer clothes crumbled at the touch like burnt paper, so that all that was left was the bitter stuff you see in the frame there. That's the yarn, and maybe Irish was right. They say folks can turn air to water now. Why not to solid? For we don't know everything our side the world, for all our cocksure ways. There's a powerful deal goes on beyond 80 degrees south that we know nothing at all about, and that's the fact.
If you enjoyed listening today, be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the red subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to receive new content notifications. If you'd like to support our work and receive exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. To support us in other ways, see the video description for links to our Bandcamp and Patreon pages, and further information relating to our releases on Audible, iTunes, and Spotify. And until next time.